each and every one of you here and wish you a healthy, happy new year. I hope everyone had awesome holidays. It's so nice to see everyone, and thank you for coming out. I want to thank the Theosophical Society for having me as a guest speaker in this monthly forum. And I want to thank Renata and Tony specifically and all the volunteers that help make this community of the Theosophy Society available. It has such wonderful offerings, and I encourage those who, if this is your first time to the Society, to join the Theosophy meetup group so you can stay informed on all their wonderful events. And I have participated in quite a few of them, and I also promote them on my own meetups as well, because I truly believe in their message and their mission, which is very similar to my personal mission and my spiritual mission. And so I'm Katie Simone. I am an advanced channeler of light beings. I'm also an author, a speaker, and a workshop facilitator. I had a spiritual awakening in 2009, and from that I developed heightened extrasensory perceptions, or psychic senses. And I'll talk a little bit about my spiritual awakenings a little bit later. And from that, I realized I had the ability to receive information telepathically in my own thought voice inside my mind at times. And so since 2009, I have channeled over 40 different light beings. I have heard their messages. They have I call them transmissions. They transmitted their information to me. And some of those light beings include human beings that have walked the planet Earth, like Aristotle. I've channeled a message from Benjamin Franklin, from Gandhi. And I also have channeled the angelic realm. I've channeled some of the archangels. I've channeled Archangel Azrael, Archangel Uriel, Archangel Michael. And I've gotten a few paragraphs of information from them to share with people, to provide hope, trust, and inspiration that your life is unfolding beautifully and as planned. And I shared these messages on my blog, which is part of my website, soulevolutioncenter.com. If you take my business card, my website is there. And my blog is part of my website. So since 2009, I've been sharing these beautiful channeled messages from these light beings. And I've also started sharing them on my Facebook page, Soul Evolution Center. I've created albums, and I have different Facebook albums where I share different messages. One album is from the angels, one album is on multidimensionality, etc. So if you like my, if you on Facebook, you can like my Soul Evolution Center Facebook page, and that's also on my business card. And what happened was in September I published my first ebook, and that was a huge milestone for me. I don't really consider myself a writer, and I haven't been a writer up until my spiritual awakening. And so and that's when I shared Aristotle's, you could say, words of wisdom. And what I like to say is I provide life wisdom from beyond through these channelings. And so before I go into the book and teachings from the book, I know that probably some of you are curious about my background and how I got to where I am, and just so you can understand how the book unfolded. And so I had a spiritual awakening in 2009, and what happened is I moved to South Florida from Connecticut with my family, and I made a promise to myself. I made a promise that I was going to start improving myself. I had just received my master's in accounting. I just passed all 4 parts of the CPA exam, and I said, good, I got all my professional designations under my belt. Now it's time for me. Now I'm just going to indulge in my self-improvement. And at that time in 2009, I didn't even know what enlightenment was. I didn't know what transcendence was. That's how very little spiritual knowledge I had. And I'm sure some of you, I know the Theosophy members are hardcore and have many years of learning and being evolved, but I wasn't like that in 2009. In 2009, I was very much, I would say I was hooded, and I didn't know it. I was living in the illusion, and I didn't know it. It's only afterwards that I realized that. And I was living a life of the physical world, of the 3D, the third dimensional, the earthly plane. And a husband, a daughter, etc. And did normal things, and I just had very probably superficial goals, to shore up my professional designations, etc. But throughout my life, I always had this desire to improve myself. And I was always attracted in sci-fi movies to those light beings that they showed as so wise and loving and compassionate. And when I saw them on the big screen, I would just be like, wow. I don't know if you guys saw the sci-fi movie The Watchmen, where they had one of the doctors who's a scientist, and he turned into a light being. He got involved in some kind of scientific experiment that went awry, and he became this translucent, huge, like human being, and he was so wise and so intelligent. And when I saw him, when he first came on the screen, I was like, doing, doing, doing. I was like, wow. I was just floored. And so, on some level, I had some attraction to, you could say, magnificent beings of benevolence and love. I just resonated with that. That was the only tickler I've had, I could say, throughout my life. And I wasn't born psychic, and my family's not psychic, and I didn't come from a family of healers. It wasn't like that. And so what happened is when I came to Florida and I started embarking on this journey of personal self-development, I want to improve some of my personality flaws. I want to become more patient, more loving, more forgiving. And so I took some classes. I even came to Theosophy Society. So I started taking classes on investing in myself. And I started saying numerous affirmations. And I don't even know why I did this. I think I must have been intuitively guided. At that time, I didn't know. I put as much effort and intention into my affirmations as I did into studying for my CPA exam. I had them written on paper, I had it on Post-its, I would say them 20, 30 times a day. And I would say them with intensity and heartfelt emotion, like you're supposed to say with affirmations. And they were really simple affirmations. I am love. I am patient. I go with the flow. I forgive. Just really simple. And that in combination with taking some spiritual classes, I started meditating for the first time. And believe me, I couldn't even meditate. I couldn't even meditate for a minute without my mind wandering. And nevertheless, I started doing that, and I started doing spiritual yoga. And during my spiritual yoga in Boca, the instructor kept telling us, you are a divine being. You are more than your physical self. You are an eternal, immortal being. I never heard that kind of stuff before. And so something happened. And I started to change. And I realized that because I no longer had some of my triggers, your emotional triggers you have, that if someone says something in a certain way or is accusatory or, your sensitivities, I wasn't reacting to some of my triggers anymore. Like my husband would say something to me, and before I would have taken it personally and maybe gotten a little angry and hurt inside. And all of a sudden I find myself in the restaurant, he just said something to me. I'm just looking at him and I'm saying to myself, he really doesn't know why he's saying that, and I feel like he's coming from his own emotional wound when he said that to me. I did this whole thing where I jumped over the arrow that was coming at me and went right over to him. And that's when I realized, wow, what was that? And then I would, be in my house and I would open up our pantry or my refrigerator door, and I would look at all the food, cans of food and packages of food, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I am so blessed to have all this food. So I got into an attitude of gratitude just from all these affirmations. So I began to see these shifts in me. I began to notice that. I said, wow, I'm really not reacting. It's so beautiful. And then I started experiencing psychic phenomena. And I'll explain a few of the precursors of the symptoms in case some of you are going through your own spiritual awakening, or if you have a loved one or a friend that may be going through a spiritual awakening. A lot of people are awakening in this day and age. And so I share my background, my experience to help those so people don't feel overwhelmed, because it is very confusing. because you're like, what's going on? What's happening to me? And so I started experiencing psychic phenomena. I started actually seeing sparks of light in the environment around people. They look like fire, just like a firefly. But, I'm sure I'll see a few today. If I look at you, also I'll see a firefly around your ear or above your head. It'll just light up and just go away. And I'd be like, what? All of a sudden I'm seeing these fireflies like during the day around people. Not all the time, but enough. Usually a few times a day. And then I started seeing these small little blue orbs, the size of dimes. And they were like a light blue, and they would flash around people. They'd flash around their ear. Sometimes they'd flash right in the person's pupil. And sometimes they'd flash right on their tongue when they're talking to me. And I was like, wow, what is this? And then I started seeing this unusual, I call it light form. It looked like a squiggly little worm. And like a curled up worm. It's very small, but it's so bright. It's like a firefly light. And it would flash in front of me, like 5 feet in front of me. And it was so bright. But it was an odd shape. And then when I was driving in my car, on Yamato, on Glades, whatever, and 15 in front of me is this big blue orb the size of a basketball. And it's almost like it was leading me on the road or something. I don't know. So this is what I started to experience. I said, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so when I got my eyes checked, which I would recommend, because you're like, oh, I got to get my eyes checked. My eyes are acting up. And the optometrist is like, no, your eyes are fine. And I'm like, okay, well, I think it must be, believe me, the optometrist was, I don't think he wasn't awakened yet. But he's like, oh yeah, it must be your spiritual awakening. You know what that meant. You have to be careful sometimes who you talk to, because sometimes people are not ready to embrace what you have learned. And so I crossed that off, and then I started having lucid dreams. My dream time changed dramatically. It's almost like a switch went off. And that was in the spring of 2009, when I was doing those intensive 3 to 4 months of spiritual studies, affirmations, going to classes. And all of a sudden I became a lucid dreamer. It was so odd. I would lift out of my bed and go into my house and my living room, and there would be parties of spirits having parties at my house at nighttime. There were like 30 or 40 beings I don't even know. They're like human beings, but they're walking around. They're in different clusters. I see spirit travels in bands. They have their family bands. They travel in 3s or 5s. This is how they roam, because I know that from experience. And so what happens is they gather sometimes. They're gathering at my house, and I was like, and so I realized, I said, oh my gosh, all these random people and all these random beings. I was like, what the heck? And so after like the first time that happened, I said, well, maybe I need to send them into the light. It just came to me. I said, send them into the light. And so the second time it happened, and I found all these human beings having a party at my house, a gathering, I would walk up to them and say, go into the light, go into the light. And no one was going into the light. And I'm like, well, that didn't work. And so I was asking some spiritual teachers that I had met in the South Florida area, and they couldn't really help me because they were not lucid dreamers. They couldn't understand my experiences. So I really had to figure it out myself. And so I said, well, they're not really responding to going to the light, so I'm going to bring the light down. I think I need to bring the light down somehow. And so I had one time when they were having a party at my house and I was lucid. So the kitchen, I said, okay, I'm bringing the light down now. But this is, again, when I'm having an out-of-body. I did this thing, and I did it through my intention. I just said, oh, I'm bringing the light down. And before you know it, this beautiful lime green light came down from the ceiling. And it was like a spotlight. And there was like little gold sparkles in it. And all of a sudden, I heard like a stampede behind me. And I heard the sound of feet running on the ground. And all of a sudden, like 40 beings just jumped into the light. Then they disappeared. They had been waiting for the light. They had been waiting for the tunnel. They had missed the tunnel upon their physical passing the first time for whatever reason. It could have been their own thought patterns that held them back. They had missed the tunnel. And they have to wait for a light portal to open so they can go to the next dimensional realm for their growth and development. And then I said, holy cow, this light thing worked. Even in the dream, in the out-of-body, I was like, this worked, And so And so I said, well, I need another light because there's still some beings in my house. So I said, so I brought down a second light, and this one became a little smaller, and then the beings jumped in again. And I was like, wow. And then there's still beings in my house. So I brought down the third light, and I noticed this light started to get more and more narrow. One person went into the light, and they did this thing where they lifted up like 1.5 feet, they hovered, and they came back down. And they hovered up 3-4 feet, and then they came back down. The light wouldn't take them. The light only accepts people at a certain vibrational level when they're ready. So this being was not ready. And so just by their vibrational level, the light is a filter that way. So this is how I hear the heavens are safeguarded. They don't let anybody into the heavens, the heavenly realms, right? There's some kind of security, some vetting. And so from that, I had a series of out-of-bodies where I was doing this thing, helping beings transition. And so I learned that kind of pretty much on my own. And so I share that technique to help people because, you really don't, I was really just winging it, but somehow it worked out fine. And so that was some of my psychic phenomena I was experiencing. And also, I went to one class at Crystal Gardens in Boynton Beach, a wonderful place to develop yourself that has many events and classes, metaphysical classes. And I went to an angel certification program. And there I learned I had the ability to channel. We did an exercise to call forth an ascended master. And then we were supposed to just write down what we received, what words we heard in our mind or whatever. And during the class, I only received bits and pieces. It wasn't much. And later on that night, I said, I'm going to try this exercise again. I'm going to contact an ascended master through my intentions and see if I can receive a good message. And so I'll never forget this. I'm on my bed with my pen and paper, and I said, I contact Master Katibe. I was just attracted to him. His name was attractive to me, so I went for him. And all of a sudden, I started to telepathically hear and feel, and I got this beautiful channeled message that was like 5 or 6 sentences long. And he talked about how mankind walked the streets of Babylonia, and then he talked about the moon, and it was very poetic. And it's not the way that I talk. It's not my style. And so when I read that message, I knew that it was someone else's way of speaking, and so I felt it was authentic. So that was my first channeled message from Master Katibe. And since then, I have this is my process. So you know, and maybe some of you can start doing this if you're not already doing it, because I've been hearing that I'm meant to teach how to channel, and I heard it again just a few days ago. So my process is what I do is I sit behind the computer. When I'm ready to channel a light being, I do it only at times when I'm open and receptive and I'm in a good mood. If I'm upset or angry, I'm having an off day, I don't channel. I have to be in such a high vibrational place. And I do it at the times of day that I am my best, maybe late morning or early afternoon, not when I'm tired late at night, like 8:30 or 8, I'm losing my energy. So pick those times and days that are good for you energetically. And then what I do is I sit behind my computer, I have an open Word document, and I usually have my crystals with me. Sometimes I have aromatherapy diffused in the environment, frankincense or lavender. Sometimes I have my relaxing spa music, Zen music from the TV. And so I start with an invocation. And it's really simple and it's standard. I usually do an open invite. And this is how I've gotten different beings, I believe. I'm always like, Katie, Simone, I'm here to do a channeling, to receive a message from a light being who of love and light, of Christ consciousness, who wants to share information with humanity. I'm going to be sharing this information. Thank you, namaste. And then usually what happens is within a few seconds, I start hearing something telepathically in my own thought voice. And sometimes they come right out and say, we are the Lantarians. We are here too. And sometimes they leave it, they just chant, they just telepathically give me the information, and as they're saying it to me, I'm typing it into my computer. But it's not automatic writing where I feel like my hand's being taken and it's typing the computer. I'm still in control of my physical body, and I'm just being a transcriber. I consider myself a transcriptionist, and I'm like a secretary when I'm hearing, and I'm just... And sometimes if they're going too fast, I'll tell them telepathically, please slow down. And usually they hear me, and they usually can tell. And sometimes if I need them to repeat something, I'll be like, okay, what was that? And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. And that's when I just put a ... or something in my Word doc. I'm like, or big question mark, you know. And then they usually end it, and they usually tell me, because I ask, that's part of my invocation, please tell me who you are, so I know, and I can start getting familiar with their vibration. And so that's how I received these messages. And now people ask me, Katie, how do you know you're really channeling? How do you know you're channeling? And how do you know this is not your imagination? You just make it up, right? Good questions, of course. And if someone told me that they were channeling it before I knew everything that I know consciously, I might have asked the same question. And so how do I know I'm channeling? I know I'm channeling because sometimes the vernacular, the vocabulary is different. They'll use words that I would never use or put it in that way. Even their sentence structure is different. It's more formal, more educated. I talk more casual. And so I'm like, they seem to be more intelligent to me and more educated to me than I am and the way I express myself. And so that's how I can tell, just by the structure of the content and the sentence formation. And also sometimes they use old terms. Like Aristotle used the word tis. You know, that's a term from the 15th century. I don't use the word tis, you know. So that's how you know, like, okay, well, that's a cue that you're receiving content from another dimensional being. And usually I hear it in my own thought voice. It's almost always in my own thought voice, because I'm kind of glad, because if I heard it in their real voices in my head, I think I might be a little freaked out, right? Like if you heard man, and women, and oh my gosh, you like, it's, you know, this is on the borderline of actual, you know, people with mental disorders. They actually hear the voices in their head. But for me, it comes in my own thought voice, and which I'm thankful for. But I'm constantly telling them, could you turn it up? You know, turn up the volume, or I didn't get that clearly. And I'm always asking for help on my process. And so that's how I know I'm channeling. And then I channel information on things that I don't even know. I don't even think about. Like I channel a message from Aristotle on reasonability. What is it to be reasonable? Like such philosophical, you know, questions. Like I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I would have. Or what is temperance? Let's talk about temperance today. You know, it's just stuff like that where you're like, okay, this is not really. If I was gonna make up something, I don't know if I would come up with this. You know, and so that was my clue. And then people ask me, well, Katie, how do you know? Oh, how do you know you're not channeling the devil? Oh, the demons, yo, boy, you know, like, and I know people sometimes get nervous about that. And I'm like, and so that's always a good check to do as a channeler, is to always check the quality of your work. Don't assume. So I always reread my messages and I see, is this high vibrational? Is this from an intelligent, benevolent, compassionate being? And today all my messages have been. I mean, but believe me, I still keep my eye on that. And you know, also, as I'm channeling, I feel like I'll be able to sense if a dark being came to me and he wants to express himself, you know. I feel like I would sense the shift of the energy, you know. And so I haven't felt that. So that's how you can tell whether someone is channeling a high vibrational being, is by the content and quality of the information that is channeled. You know, my guides don't criticize people. They're very loving and they're very diplomatic, and they don't come from ego. They're very tactful. And so this is how I differentiate. But if at any time, if I heard that in my head, I would right away have to take precautionary measures or put my foot down or something like that, express myself. But that's how I vet it. And that's how you should as well. When you read channelings, you should look at the quality of the channeling. And that's how you can discern. You be the judge. I won't be the judge. You can be the judge. If you download my book, you'll be the judge of whether you feel this is an authentic channeling from high vibrational being. And so another important thing I just want to share before I talk about Aristotle is that people ask me, well, like, how do you become a channeler? How do you develop your channeling abilities? And I share 3 tips in the ebook. And one of them is just learning to listen to your mind. And the second one is minimizing your self-talk. Because what I find is the less thoughts I have. And the average human being has 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day, right? That's been proven in like experiments and research. That's a lot of thoughts, 60 to 90 thoughts a day. How many of those thoughts serve you well? How many of those thoughts are self-empowering? How many of those thoughts are critical? Or as Aristotle said, like hypercritical. We're critical of yourself. So I've slowed down the number of thoughts I have a day. I can't come up with a number, but I've created enough pauses in my own thought stream where I can tell a being is giving me transmission, okay? And that takes practice. That takes being mindful. I believe there's a class here at the Theosophy Society about Jürgen's way, or Gurdjieff?
Gurdjieff is Monday.
Gurdjieff's way. It's all about being mindful and being aware of your self-talk. So that would be my big teaching point for you. If you're wanting to learn how to connect with your angels, your etheric guides, connect with light beings, to learn to become mindful of your self-talk, slow it down, and then you have to go into listening mode. I spend quite a bit of my day just listening to my thoughts. I don't create them. I listen. And when you listen, you might be surprised what you hear. You might be actually receiving your spiritual guidance. So I've gone into not creating my own thoughts, listening. So I listen as much as possible. And then when I listen, I'm like, oh gosh, I hear all kinds of things. And then I'm like, and there are things that I wasn't on my conscious radar. I hear names of like ancient civilizations or things like that. And that's how I can tell I'm receiving a transmission, okay? Like, for example, in Aristotle's book, I channeled a message from the Altunans, okay? For weeks, I was hearing Altuna. I just heard it randomly and sporadically during the day. That's all I heard. I'd be washing dishes in my car, Altuna. I'm like, what the heck is this Altuna? I'm thinking, are they trying to, do I have like a Spanish guy telling me to eat more tuna fish? Like you go into all kinds of things. Because it wasn't a clear stream of information. It wasn't coherent. It wasn't flowing. And then finally, they came to me one time when I was behind my computer, and they gave me a channeled message. And Altuna is an ancient civilization from Belize that was in existence, I think, up until 900 AD. So these were a group of beings that had something to share, and they came to me, okay? And that's how I knew you're receiving information. I didn't know what Altuna was. I had to Google it. I'm like, oh, that's what Altuna, you know. So that's how you can verify the authenticity. And so let me just talk about, does anyone have any questions? That's just basically my process and about my background, a little bit about how channeling works. And we all channel naturally, and you guys are probably channeling every day. It just happens spontaneously. And you don't even realize it. You can channel a feeling, a thought, a principle. And many people, I believe a lot of writers are just natural channels. And they'll probably never admit it, like receiving information from beyond. But I'm like, they're just a natural conduit. So a lot of you channel spontaneously without being aware of it. Isn't that amazing? And maybe you've said something to somebody, and like your friend said, oh my gosh, I so need to hear that today. Or you told me exactly what I wanted. Did you ever run into that? So you channeled some necessary, helpful information to them. You were a channel. And so we all channel. I'm not the only one that channels, okay? But the only thing I would say is that maybe I'm a little unique, is that I can recognize when I'm channeling, because I've become aware, self-aware, and I'm aware of what's in my mind, what's coming into my mind. And I'm also able to break it down, because I'm meant to be a teacher in this life incarnation. So I'm a little bit more technical, right? I can be a little bit more differentiating. So maybe that's the only difference, but everyone here channels on some level or another, in some form or another. And you can all develop this ability if you practice, if you're aware, etc. Okay? And so, does anyone have any questions so far?
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Before before you start writing, do you feel your back start popping and then your body start